In a world where Hollywood movies have sucked for over a decade, two men have done the unthinkable. They've started their own production company from nothing. Welcome to Unpacked.
Welcome back to another episode of Unpacked, the official podcast of Packed House Pictures. I'm Matt Rainey. This is my friend and colleague, Jason Kiesel.
Hello. How are you?
Jason, how are you today?
I like to keep it short. My intro.
Short and sweet. We appreciate everyone for joining us again, following us along on this adventure as we start our own film production company from nothing.
Yes.
In the first episode, we talked about why we wanted to do this and why we thought we could, why we were crazy enough to think that we could. We might be a little crazy. And then we talked about, in the second episode, our first step. You know, we knew it all starts with scripts. We want to be a screenplay, original story first production company. You know, whether we're making something for the theater, whether we're making something for the TV screen, whether we're making something for the phone, we wanted to start with original storytelling, and we launched our own screenwriting competition.
Yep.
We got over 300 entrants from all over the world, from all different kinds of genres, specifically looking for things that are low budget. We found scripts that we liked, things that encouraged us, that made us believe that, okay, we're off and running. We've got some scripts. But once you have scripts, really comes the perhaps most daunting, most challenging aspect of the whole thing is that if you're going to make the movie, if you're going to turn that script into something on the screen,
the money?
You cannot do it for nothing.
Give me the money, Lebowski.
Give me that. You need some funds.
Yeah, how do you hire everybody to make the film? Well, you need some money, you need some cash, you need a little capital to do that.
Because the crazy thing is like once you have money, what you can kind of do is actually kind of crazy. Part of what we were talking about when we talked about why we wanted to do this and is that a lot of funding a movie and what makes it so hard and a lot of the economics behind movies is risk, right? Like,
yes,
we've already said a couple of times on this podcast, it is really hard to get people to want to watch something. It's even harder to get people to want to pay money to watch something. You know, it's easy kind of like if you're on Netflix and you know you're paying your either $10, $12, $15, $17, whatever it is on your subscription
HBO
plan.
is up to like $18, I think.
But you know what? You spent your $18, which is probably, you know, what one IMAX movie ticket
One
costs,
movie ticket, yeah.
You know, and so then you can just be like, well,
and you get Game of Thrones. You get like six seasons.
Okay, I'll
of
watch all of Game of Thrones, or I'll try this movie, or I'll try that movie, and maybe you don't finish it, but you'll try it. You know, versus like, hey, here's this movie you don't know much about. Spend $15 or $18 to watch that movie is tough. And it's part of the reason why. Yeah,
it's even tough when you have big name actors.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah.
We're starting to see that that's not even a big enough draw to get the crowds. You know, you sign, you know, a well-known actor and you think that that's going to be the draw that pulls people into the theaters, and it doesn't. And, you know, it's just, we're living in this world of just constant, a barrage of content, you know, and it's some good.
And so much
bad.
of it is not free necessarily, but, you know, bundled into one low price, or, you know, some of it's free with ads, you know. It's challenging, but, you know, you and I both love movies. We believe that there are people out there who still love movies and want to watch movies. Our theory of mitigating the risk is different than I think what Hollywood's theory of mitigating the risk is. And Hollywood has decided to mitigate the risk by making more sequels, leveraging IP, you know, kind of casting the same people all the time, you know, people that are proven commodities.
It makes sense that a studio, if they've had success with a director and his team or her team, that, you know, they're going to look at them again and be like, okay, what do you got now? You know, we made good money on that one. Let's do this again. And so it does make it difficult for somebody outside of the system or somebody that doesn't have that track record to kind of get their foot in the door. And,
you know, you can have, like you were talking about with this example here, you know, you can have a certain amount of dollars, but if the people spending the dollars or the people that you're spending the dollars on aren't talented enough or skilled enough or driven enough, your end result's still not going to be the same. Like that $6 million is not necessarily equal. one company getting $6 million and another company getting $6 million, the talent within there, and of course whatever the core concept is, are all going to, really impact what your end result is. But it's interesting from a Hollywood standpoint in that you see these companies, especially streamers, that would go to showrunners or writers or creators, and they would give them these huge overall deals, kind of because they're trusting that concept, right? Like, here's this person who's really talented. They can do it over and over again. And then just spending loads of money, and almost 2-1, almost none of those huge overall deals, I think, have really panned out by and large for these companies, even though, and it was interesting during the pandemic, it was clearly a strategy that a lot of the studios were using, were kind of like using that pandemic time to kind of end big contracts with these creators for whom they weren't really seeing a payoff, a return on investment. But it's interesting that they're kind of doing those same things again, like the Duffer Brothers who made Stranger Things. They were, on Netflix, and now they've signed a huge, huge deal with Paramount. And it's like, is Paramount ever going to see that ROI? Are they going to be able to repeat the magic of Stranger Things? And I don't know. Maybe they will. I mean,
I hope
Taylor
they do.
Sheridan is clearly
that's who I was going to bring up. Taylor Sheridan is
someone who's had hit after hit after
different, though, right? And that's the difference, right? I mean, it's very difficult in my mind to compare the Duffer Brothers with Taylor Sheridan, because Taylor Sheridan has produced hit after hit after hit. I mean, we've got the film we're going to unpack today, Hell or High Water. It did well. 1923, 1883. Landman,
yeah.
Like, what else is he? Mayor of Kingstown, Lioness. Like, all of these series have all done very, very well.
Yeah,
and I think he just got. I think he's leaving Paramount. He got offered a massive deal by, I think, NBC, and so he's jumping ship. And I think Paramount is stupid to let him go. They should have. Well, I heard that the owner of Paramount was micromanaging him a bit, and he didn't like that. So, you kind of need to let these folks do what they do, but within reason.
It's interesting for us, though, that we are trying to find a different way to mitigate risk. And it's been a really interesting journey for us since we got our screenplays, and we sort of have something to kind of start with, right? Like some chips to kind of move on to the table.
Yeah.
We do have connections with various companies and, with talented folks around Hollywood. But sort of our core concept was, and we are not the only ones who have this idea, is that how can we mitigate risk so that we can tell more original stories? Obviously, one way to mitigate risk is to simply bring the budget down, right? But like we were talking about with Anora, we talked about Anora a couple of episodes ago. They spent $6 million making that movie, which is a really low budget to make something that was really good and looked really good. But then they spent over $18 million marketing that movie to try to get it to win an Oscar, that's a ton of money. Now you're talking about mid $20 million, which a small company like ours isn't going to have. We're not going to have anywhere near to that amount of money. And so you can't do it just by bringing the dollar amount down. There's plenty of movies that have been made that have even been crowdfunded for super low budgets, and you never hear about them. They disappear because there was no marketing money, or word of mouth never was never strong enough to get them promoted. And look, there's an argument that might be maybe the movies just weren't good enough. I think that's fair. That's a fair thing to say. And eventually, hopefully, we will be talking about the challenge of trying to make a movie as good as it can be for as low a dollar amount as we can film it. Right now we're just talking about, can we find enough money to even make the thing a reality? Our big concept is, how can we involve movie lovers earlier and throughout the process to fund the movie? Basically, like trying to go out and, pre-sell tickets.
Pre-sell tickets and engaging folks with behind the scenes content, and kind of creating a community around the production process, if you will. That's really, I think, where we're focusing on, and I think we'll have success. Obviously we need to attract the right talent, for lack of a better term, to attach to some of the projects, but because it is difficult to raise money without that, right? You need some, we can tell a story, give a log line, put up some some storyboards, but there's only so much kind of incentive that you can give somebody or reasons to give somebody to throw down, 20 or $30 for,
they've got to
you know,
believe that they're going to get a
free ticket.
quality product on the other side of that.
Correct.
And, we've got some challenges in front of us in terms of drawing, and it's a chicken or the egg kind of thing, right? Because like you need the talent to get the money, but you need the money to get the talent. And it's like, how do you kind of do that? And, I think eventually what we would like to be able to say that we're able to do is pre-sell tickets and also sell behind the scenes access, like what you were saying, enough to fund movies.
Yeah.
Maybe even at a $2 or $3 or $4 million kind of range. We're not aiming that high at the beginning at all, because it's going to be challenging. It's going to be hard to get. So I think we are going to end up leveraging.
And
Go ahead.
I'm hoping that one of the key aspects of our business, one of the kind of the key tenets that we have, is this notion of transparency within essentially the financing, the production, and eventual revenue streams of these projects that we do, in the sense that a big assumption I have is that if we can convince actors and directors that we're not going to screw them on back end points, as pretty much is the practice now, the common practice in Hollywood.
Yeah.
If we can convince them that we're above board, they can trust us. Here are our books. We're an open book for you. You can kind of see everything that comes in and out. We're not going to be hiding anything or shuffling money here to there and moving stuff around to kind of show a loss where we've actually had a gain. That if they do like the project enough and believe it in enough, that they will participate with everyone else in the kind of spoils of victory, so to speak. So, that's how it is in my world, the tech world. Like everybody works for options. You want to get in early, so you get kind of the best share price, if you will. And when you do get that successful exit and product, everybody wins. There's a notion of like, we're all in this together. Let's all participate in the benefit of it. And from our perspective, we're going to be giving points to everybody involved in the film, and that includes below the line crew. So,
well, it's tough, and I understand. I certainly understand where the actors are coming from, because first of all, as we've said a couple of times, like,
well, fool me once, right? I mean,
yeah. So there's the Hollywood side of it, but there's also just the fact that like most movies that get made, indie movies. I mean, who knows? Like, I don't even really know what the statistics are for Hollywood films, but like, there's a massive percentage of movies that get made, shorts, feature length, whatever, that never make any money, like never, and just sort of disappear. And I think that it's even more the case now, just with streaming and online platforms and stuff like that. So it's like, people hear points and profit and that sort of stuff, and they just sort of shrug their shoulders, like, because like they don't believe that that it's going to make money. But to your point, when films have made money, there have been so many times that people who were promised money on the back end never saw it. And so,
I mean,
that's the part that's the bigger shame, is that
the one that for me comes to mind is Jamie Kennedy, who I'm a big fan of, comedian, was in the Beverly Hills, blanking on the title, but it did like 80 million at the box office, and I think it was only made for less than 10 or less. And he went to the studio and said, "Hey, where's my cut?" And they're like, "Oh, well, your movie lost money." He's like, "What do you mean? Made $80 million?" And they buried it in a bunch of, other losses. They kind of merged them all together and said, "Well, sorry, you don't have any back end." So,
well, and that is not an uncommon story. That happens
that's normal,
over and over again. And so, I think people would be willing to do more stuff for like scale or for a lower money. And look, actors, to their credit, still do. Actors who are their name is worth money will often take on projects that they believe in, because they believe in the project, and they've got the financial security to be able to do that. But they certainly don't, they don't believe necessarily that they're going to see any money down the road. They've done it because they believed in the project. And that is a shame. And I think movies would be, we're talking about risk mitigation and bringing the cost of making movies down. If people actually believed that there was a chance legitimately that they would see money on the back end, more talent above and below the line might be willing to take less upfront if they thought for sure they could see something down the road. Just there's those two challenges. The one challenge being a lot of things that are made don't end up making money. And the other challenge being that Hollywood has been very dishonest when it has made money and
Yeah.
has not shared that profit. And the one thing that we can tackle for sure is being honest. Like, and I think it's easier for us to be honest the more of the money that we've raised that's less risky, and
Correct. Oh yeah.
there's a lot of ways we can do that. We talk about like trying to build a community of people who see the slate of movies and take a chance on us and buy in advance their ticket or buy a t-shirt or a poster or whatever. And we raise some money that way. But there's other types of investing that can bring in more than 15 to 30 or $40 at a pop, that are traditionally used to raise money for film that help investors in a certain category give money that they would have been giving away anyway, and at least have the lottery ticket chance that that money turns into profit. There's certain tax shelter methods and tax sections that,
Yep.
And I think that we are realistic in that our first time out, we might have to leverage some more traditional financing methods as we build our community to kind of help give us a kickstart. And very fortunately, we have connections with production companies and with financiers that hopefully can give us a boost and help us kind of get started. But our end goal is to, like an A24 or some of the companies like Blumhouse or whatever that are out there, is to find a community of film lovers that want to get involved not only in giving a movie a chance to get made, but then following on and watching that movie come to life.
Yeah, I see parallels with like supporting kind of mom and pop local shops versus big box stores, right?
Yeah.
Like, if the big box stores are great. I go to a Home Depot, I can get what I need for really cheap. But sometimes, you want to support a local small businessman, and because they're in your community and you want to support your community. And that's a little bit how I see it, right? I mean, what would this world be if there were no small businesses and everything was like a chain? Like it'd be lame.
And there are like, I don't,
he's so
I'm
boring.
not the person who I don't want chains to go away. Like I don't want,
and they're not going away. So
studios to go away. No. Yeah. I actually, especially for the first 10 years, I felt really lucky to be there for the birth and best part of the life of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Like it was really cool. Like it was really
Iron
neat
Man.
to see these movies brought to life in a way that was very comic faithful and fun. I'm glad I got to be there for that. I'm glad that movies, even though I don't love the Avatar movies, I'm glad that movies of that scale exist and are there in the theater, because I love big spectacle movies. I love blockbusters. But I think where the indie world comes in is that those studios are not willing to take risks on news stories that could eventually become big franchises. Like something like, say, like the very first Mad Max, which was made for a song.
Yeah, it's made for nothing.
The only reason that you've got Mad Max Fury Road and Mad Max Furiosa, which are these huge 100 million plus budget films, Mad Max Fury Road may be one of the best action movies ever made, along with maybe Road Warrior, which was also made for a much bigger budget. But none of those movies would exist if they hadn't made the super low budget for nothing. You talk about like the entire slasher genre.
Look at Rocky.
Yeah.
Rocky's another example, I think it made for $1 million.
Yeah,
they did 2, 3, 4, 5. Was there a 6?
Eventually it becomes, one of the, well, if you count like Creed,
Creed 2
box office dollars, they're going to be making a Creed. Well, they already did.
That is an entire IP ecosystem that was created from this tiny independent.
That's right. And that's where we feel like, in our wildest dreams, could we find the next low budget thing that ends up ballooning and growing into something big? And you've got to give those things a chance. And they come at that sort of mom and pop level. And, so whatever kind of scrappy means necessary.
I think Blumhouse is the master at that, by the way.
Well, and A24, really good at it. But in the old days, a lot of times it was, directors kind of, really willing to take some of the financial risk themselves, or showing the skill of doing something really good for next to nothing. And allowing your creativity to be challenged by the fact that you don't have unlimited funds, as opposed to limited by the fact that you don't have unlimited funds. I think we've seen so many times in Hollywood where they can just green screen everything And it's like, it doesn't end up being better. Like, it's not better to just green. If you really know what you're doing with the green screen, great. It can look awesome, but really being challenged to like make something look good for not much is exciting, and it has produced so many great results in films from our childhood, obviously, and I don't think that has to stop now.
Yeah.
I think it could keep going. I mean, we were talking about Taylor Sheridan earlier. It's funny because we talk about his TV empire, like it's this thing, and we list all the shows, Lioness, all the Yellowstone shows, and there's more spinoffs coming. Like, this
Mayor
guy's
of
like
Kingstown and
unbelievable. But really, before he had his success in TV, he wrote a few theatrical screenplays that were really
one
great.
We're talking about today.
Yeah,
Hell or High Water.
Hell or High Water being one of the earliest ones. Now, I mean, he also wrote Sicario, which is outstanding.
That's
and
unbelievable.
Wind River, which I think is incredible. But
let me ask you this. And no shade on Taylor Sheridan, but do you think Sicario was such a good film because of the way it was shot and directed versus the screenplay?
I mean, look at the guy.
When you look at that scene, that one scene where in the car in traffic trying to cross the border, and it's just the angles, it's like there's just so much tension that is created just on the way that thing is shot, right?
Well,
over the shoulder, so looking through, like it's just.
This is a great thing to bring up because we've talked about the talent, that you need to have the talent, and we say we want to be a script first company, and so we've gone out and we've found some scripts, and we think that we can build some great things from those scripts for hopefully very, very little money. But those scripts have to be brought to life, right? Like, and we've got to go out and find the talent that can do those sort of things. Now, Taylor Sheridan has written enough. Like, not all of the movies that he's written have ended up being great, but he wrote 3 that ended up being really good. And we're going to talk about one today. We'll talk about Hell or High Water, but Hell or High Water, Wind River, and Sicario are all really good movies. And they're all directed by different people, and they all star different people. And so clearly he has written stories that resonate and that are a great backbone that allow talented people to come in. One of the interesting things that I think we'll have to talk about once we have raised money and hired a director is that choice of who's going to direct this movie, and having those early conversations and looking at storyboards and saying, like, what is this movie going to look like? Like, what is going to be the signature moments? How can we make this movie look the best for the dollars that we're putting in? Because even though we might have a really good screenplay, that, just like John Kraft told me all those years ago, like, there is a long way to go from a good screenplay to a good movie or a good show. And there's a lot of different places along the way where it can get totally screwed up. I think the problem is that I think a lot of people enter the movie making creative experience believing they are that person.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
When in fact, really what most of us are, and I would include myself in that, what most of us are role players. Like, you are good at something. Like, you're really good at something. You're good at this thing. Doesn't mean necessarily you're good at everything. And being able to work on a team that brings out, and I guess the person that I think about when I think about who that might be in terms of like a Hollywood example would be like a Clint Eastwood. From what I've read, and I've never met Clint Eastwood myself or been on one of his sets or anything like that, but from what I have read is that they say that you could walk onto a Clint Eastwood set, and unless you knew what Clint Eastwood looked like, you wouldn't necessarily know that he was the director. Like, he's not this guy who like kind of lords over everybody. He is a guy who apparently really trusts everyone that he's surrounded himself with to do their job. And Clint Eastwood is very famous for coming in on time and under budget with all of his movies because he doesn't do a lot of takes. He doesn't do a lot of things over again.
He's a professional. He expects you to be professional.
And he expects you to be professional. And he creates that sort of team environment. And I think for us, the odds that we're going to find the next Scorsese or Spielberg are very low. But that doesn't mean that we can't find really good role players who are good at their individual thing and in aggregate create something really good. It's just recruiting the right kind of people that have that shared attitude that, there is going to be, the director is going to be the person in charge, but does that director understand, that what their role is and what the actor's role is and what the writer's role has been and our role as producers, like,
and with our model, everybody will take,
Yeah. everyone can win some, can get some reward if
Yeah, they take part in the success, which is what
and was Hell or High Water successful? Speaking of
I think it
that movie,
was. So here are the numbers on Hell or High Water. It cost $12 million.
which is a lot for the indie kind of
Was it?
movies that we're talking
It
about.
is.
We're
But
certainly not going to shoot anything for $12 million.
this was the
I
film that he
believe.
did after Sicario, so I think he was probably given a little bit bigger budget to do what he wanted, would be my guess. The domestic opening wasn't that great. It was only about 600,000, but the total was 27. So it kind of started slow, ended strong.
I
The
think that one
worldwide
also had
gross was 38
was a
million.
38
So it
at
made a
least.
million-ish.
Yeah, Hell or High Water is the kind of movie that would have had a great run in Blockbuster
Yeah.
on an HBO. And so there's a world in the 90s where Hell or High Water is made and ends up making, 38 million in the box office and then another 38 million
Yeah.
in home sales. And then you're talking about, well, Hell or High Water was like super profitable,
Yeah. Streaming killed the studio
Yeah.
model. I mean, it really
Yeah,
did.
it really did. And so, we will see if our community model, can work, but a great movie.
I think
great movie
I believe it
regardless.
can. Right. I mean, at the end of the day, I think what differentiates us from a monster studio besides size is the size. It is what the studios are trying to do from a business perspective. They're not going to make a $15 million movie and hope to double it and make 15 on top of that, or even 30 on top of that, like 2x the profit on
Yeah.
that. That doesn't move the needle for them. They're a publicly traded company. They're worth billions of dollars. A $20 million gain is like what they do in 2 weeks, So that would have to be replicated over and over again. So for them to make money that is significant enough for their shareholders, because at the end of the day, that's what they're doing. They are providing value for shareholders. And if they can't grow that business in such a way that benefits them, it's a bad business. So they have to take bigger bets. And when you take a bigger bet, you want to mitigate risk. You don't want a lot. Like, I'm not going to spend $100 million on it, something that has no book following, like it's not a novel that's got a huge number of fans. I actually had this conversation with my former head of revenue, chief revenue officer. And as I was looking to do another business, there's when you're building software, who you sell to and how much you sell it to makes a big difference. If I'm selling that for $50 a month, like the amount of pain to get that person to buy it at $50 a month is a lot, right? The idea would be like sell it to them for $500 a month. Like, will the same buyer spend 500 versus 50? Because the work needed to get them to spend 10x is probably the same. I think with the studio, the amount of effort.
To use the baseball analogy, like you want to swing for the idea of playing small ball where you're going to hit enough singles to drive in enough runs to win doesn't work for them. You need to hit the home run or the grand slam. Like that's what. So you're always going for the home run every time you go up to the bat, even though it leads to more strikeouts.
Yes. To make my money, I can either start 12 startups that have a good amount of capital behind them, or I try to start 50 startups with a little less capital behind them. The risk is just so much better for me as a studio to fund that, especially when those all have built-in IP and customer and audiences and,
Well, and so I wonder if it's an interesting
favorites.
question to bring up. I mean, look, we're having this conversation not right in front of, but in front of, people who might prospectively join our community or whatever. But if the brand name that we are eventually going to be selling is our own, obviously, hopefully we create pieces of content that grab people and, whether it be a film or something for TV or on the phone or whatever, but something that grabs people and gets them excited. At the end of the day, with this sort of model that we're creating, building this community, it's really going to be Packed House Pictures, right? That's going to be like, that's the thing. I wonder if, making those startups that are these movies over and over again less painful, and I wonder if it would work, would be to do like kind of a Christopher Guest kind of model where it's like we are using a lot of the same people over and over and over again. And like, would movie audiences accept that? If not all, but if like you keep seeing a lot of actors show up in our movies over and over again, if we keep using a lot of the same crew, if we keep,
I think you could do that. And the reason I say I believe we can do that is because you at that point kind of treat I don't want to say a loss leader, but you leverage the success of, let's say we come up with, we find a screenplay that has a great following and we're able to make, sequel number 2 and 3, right? those will go to fund all of the other projects. The net of that will go back into kind of finding that next bit of IP that we can, at budget prices,
to be in. That's something interesting for us to think about in terms of, and also to think about, like, will we get to a point, like right now we're very open about the type of story that we're looking for and the type of story that we're going to tell. Do we get to a point where the funnel sort of narrows on that a little bit, where we're finding our community who likes a certain type of movie and we end up making more of that type of movie rather than, any good story that we come across.
Like Jason Blum at
Blumhouse.
Yeah.
Do we, it's all very interesting kind of, postulation and speculation, and who knows?
Time will tell.
I certainly know a lot of really good actors who deserve more roles than what they're getting and can play so many different types of roles that it would certainly be interesting to leverage them as many times as possible. Those would be perfect.
Hey, we can't pay you a lot up front, but if you'd like to explore your ability to, you're a comedian, you want to get into more dramatic roles, we have a role for you. You like the script, you like the story, and you're still getting paid. It's not like we're not going to pay you, but it'll be scale, and we'll be very generous on the back end with folks. And it really, at that point, it's betting on yourself, and your ability to build a great product and tell a good story.
Circling back to Hell or High Water, did Taylor Sheridan direct that one? Did he direct Hell or High Water?
No, David McKenzie directed it.
David McKenzie. So, Chris Pine is like, for a time, I don't know how big of a draw his name is right now, like, some years later, but there was a brief time where, I mean, look, he was in like everything, right? Like
Star Trek.
He did the movie with Denzel, Unstoppable. He did like the Coast Guard movie. The guy was in everything. Like, but Ben Foster, like, that dude has been in so many movies. He never phones it in. Some people complain that he maybe, like, choose the scenery a bit too much, but like, I love that guy. Like, that guy that's the kind of guy, it's like he's a chameleon. Like, he can be so many different types of characters. And
he chipped his tooth for this role, by the way.
Well, and I don't know what the most money Ben Foster has ever made in any one given film, because I don't think he's ever been the number one, like, ever. He's like a character actor, but like, the guy can play anything. I love him. My favorite Ben Foster role is Charlie in 3:10 to Yuma, the 3:10 to Yuma remake, which is so good, with Russell Crowe and Christian Bale. Like, and of course, Russell Crowe and Christian Bale, like, they get the their names are on the marquee and they're great. But like, Ben Foster is so good. And that final scene at the end when the Russell Crowe character turns on his own guys, like, it's just so good. I mean,
he plays the gritty kind of character very well.
But he can be funny. He can be scary. He can be scared. Like, Ben Foster is great. And I feel like, I mean, Ben Foster's great, but like, I do know actors, a couple in particular, who are just so versatile and so good. And a lot of them are stage actors, and they just, for whatever reason, have slipped through the Hollywood cracks. And it's like, if we can get some money, I'd love to put them in some of our stuff.
Yeah, Ben, if you're listening, we might have a role
and
for
Ben Foster, we would absolutely. I'd love to. But that's sort of our, that's obviously what we're going to try to do. I think it's going to be exciting to share on the podcast how that goes, but also the sort of more traditional means that we might use to kind of give ourselves a boost here at the beginning and get some stuff made. The different types of raises that we're trying, like, hopefully in the next several podcast episodes, we're able to kind of talk about what success or not success we're having in terms of like bringing money in and how hard or fortunate we've been. But more to come
Definitely.
As we continue to unpack our journey.
Thank you for joining us on this journey from zero to independent film production company.
Yes, right now we're from zero to, like, a few $1,000s, but we're gonna get there.
We're getting there. We're
gonna get there.
So,
all right, bye everybody.
Thanks everybody. Thanks for joining. Bye.